The granite walls of Shawshank State Penitentiary cast long shadows across the Maine countryside on a bitter evening in 1947, their imposing silhouette a stark reminder of the boundary between freedom and captivity. Among the new arrivals that day was Andy Dufresne, whose journey from the polished corridors of Maine National Bank to the cold confines of a maximum security prison marked one of life's crueler ironies. The successful banker, whose name had once commanded respect throughout Portland's financial circles, now faced 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders of his wife and her lover, a local golf professional named Glenn Quentin. The trial had captivated Maine's attention for months, dominating newspaper headlines and dinner table conversations from Portland to Bangor. Despite maintaining his innocence with an almost unnerving tranquility, the evidence against Andy seemed overwhelming. The prosecution had meticulously constructed their case. The .38 caliber revolver discovered with his fingerprints, multiple witnesses who placed him near the country club on the fateful night, and a motive that resonated with the jury's fundamental understanding of human nature. The district attorney, Richard Harrison, painted Andy as a calculating man who, upon discovering his wife's infidelity, had executed a precisely planned act of vengeance. His very composure during the trial worked against him, as the jury interpreted his calm demeanor not as the bearing of an innocent man, but as the cold detachment of a ruthless killer. The heavy iron gates of Shawshank closed behind Andy with an ominous finality that February evening, the metallic clang echoing through the prison yard like a funeral bell. The prison, a Gothic monument of weathered stone and rusted steel, dominated the landscape like a medieval fortress transported through time. Its imposing architecture seemed designed not just to contain bodies, but to crush spirits. Inside, the air hung heavy with a peculiar mixture of industrial disinfectant, sweat, and what could only be described as the pungent aroma of abandoned hope. Ellis Boyd, Red Redding, serving a life sentence for a crime he freely admitted he committed, observed the new arrivals from his privileged position in the prison yard. His eyes, sharp and discerning, after decades behind bars, took particular notice of Andy. As the prison's unofficial procurement specialist, Red had developed an almost supernatural ability to read men, to understand their needs and weaknesses before they themselves were fully aware of them. It was a skill that had made him a man who knows how to get things. Everything from cigarettes to contraband that the guards pretended not to notice, as long as the right palms were greased. When Andy first approached Red about obtaining a rock hammer, ostensibly for his hobby of collecting and shaping rocks, Red's instincts told him there was more to this quiet man than met the eye. Unlike the typical fresh fish who arrived at Shawshank, either already broken or trying desperately to project toughness they didn't possess, Andy carried himself with a dignity that seemed almost alien within those walls. His composure wasn't born of arrogance or naivety. It stemmed from something deeper, a core of inner strength that Red would come to understand and admire over the years that followed. The first 2 years of Andy's imprisonment were a crucible that would have broken lesser men. The Sisters, a predatory gang led by the sadistic Boggs Diamond, targeted him with a frequency that would have driven most men to madness or suicide. Their attacks, brutal and relentless, left Andy physically battered but spiritually intact. He endured their brutality with the same quiet resilience he showed in every aspect of his imprisonment, emerging from each assault somehow unchanged at his core, like a stone that water might flow around but could never erode. The friendship between Andy and Red developed gradually, beginning with simple transactions, but evolving into something far more meaningful. Their conversations, starting with mundane requests for items from the outside world, grew into profound discussions about literature, philosophy, and the nature of hope itself. Andy's cell, adorned with a succession of posters featuring Hollywood starlets Rita Hayworth, Marilyn Monroe, and later Raquel Welch, became a sanctuary of sorts, where the two men could momentarily forget their circumstances and engage in conversations that transported them beyond Shawshank's walls. Andy's position within the prison hierarchy underwent a dramatic shift following his chance encounter with Captain Byron Hadley. During a routine work detail on the roof, Andy overheard the brutal guard's complaints about inheritance taxes on a recently acquired property. Taking what seemed like an insane risk, he approached Hadley. Standing in the prison yard, surrounded by men who had seen others beaten for far less, he offered financial advice that would save the guard a significant sum. The silence that followed his offer was absolute, and for a moment it appeared Andy had signed his own death warrant. But his knowledge proved invaluable, and soon he found himself managing the financial affairs of not just Hadley, but half the guards at Shawshank. This development caught the attention of Warden Samuel Norton, a man who clothed his corruption in the garments of pious Christianity. Norton's office walls bore framed needlepoint homilies. "His judgment cometh, and that right soon," while his safe contained ledgers documenting years of kickbacks and embezzlement. He recognized in Andy a tool that could be utilized for his own enrichment. Soon, Andy was orchestrating an elaborate money laundering scheme under the name Randall Stevens, handling the warden's illegal profits with the same expertise he had once applied to legitimate banking. The irony of a convicted murderer managing the finances of his own prison was not lost on Andy, but he used his position to effect what changes he could within the system. The prison library became Andy's passion project, his means of offering something meaningful to his fellow inmates. Through years of persistent letters to the state authorities, what began as a few shelves of donated books grew into a comprehensive library that offered more than just reading material. It offered the possibility of transformation. Andy became a teacher and mentor, helping inmates earn their high school equivalency degrees, treating them not as criminals but as men capable of growth and learning. His quiet determination transformed the library into a haven of knowledge and hope within Shawshank's oppressive walls. The arrival of Tommy Williams in 1965 brought a new energy to Shawshank and a glimmer of hope for Andy's case. The young inmate, serving time for burglary, shared a story that changed everything. His former cellmate at Thomaston, Elmo Blatch, had bragged about killing a golf pro and his lover, while the woman's husband took the fall. The details matched Andy's case perfectly, offering the first real possibility of proving his innocence. But when Andy brought this information to Warden Norton, he discovered the true depth of the warden's malevolence. Norton, unwilling to lose his prized financial wizard, had Tommy transferred and subsequently murdered, effectively crushing Andy's hopes for legal exoneration. What no one knew, not even read, was that Andy had been orchestrating the most patient escape in prison history. For 19 years, he had been gradually tunneling through his cell wall with the rock hammer Red had procured for him, covering his work with those iconic posters that marked the passing decades. Each night, he removed small amounts of wall, disposing of the evidence in the exercise yard during his daily walks, like a man feeding birds. The tunnel itself was a masterpiece of engineering and patience, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, but representing thousands of hours of painstaking labor. The night of Andy's escape coincided with a fierce thunderstorm that masked any sound of his final breakthrough. His journey through 500 yards of sewage pipes was a baptism of sorts, a physical ordeal that matched the mental anguish of his years of wrongful imprisonment. When he emerged into the rain-soaked night, he was more than just a free man. He was reborn. The thunder that night seemed to herald not just a storm, but a fundamental shift in the balance of justice. Andy's revenge was as meticulously planned as his escape. Before disappearing, he had mailed detailed evidence of the warden's corruption to various newspapers and law enforcement agencies, ensuring that justice would be served, albeit not in the way he had originally hoped. The exposure of Norton's crimes led to a massive investigation that shook the main correctional system to its core, ultimately resulting in the warden's suicide and the imprisonment of several guards. The man who had hidden his corruption behind Bible verses found himself facing a judgment far more immediate than the one his needlepoint had promised. For Red, life after Andy's escape became a study in contrasts. The hope that Andy had tried to instill in him fought against the institutionalization that 40 years of imprisonment had ingrained in his psyche. When he finally gained parole in 1967, after decades of denials, the outside world seemed more threatening than promising. The grocery store where he worked as a bag boy felt more confining than his cell had, and the boarding house where he lived was just another kind of prison, its walls invisible, but no less real. Yet Andy's influence had taken root deeper than Red realized. Following the instructions in a letter Andy had arranged for him to receive, Red made his journey to the small Maine town of Buxton. There, beneath an old oak tree, he found not just another letter and money, but the key to his own redemption. The decision to violate his parole and follow Andy's trail to Mexico was perhaps the first truly free choice Red had made in decades. A decision that represented not just physical escape, but spiritual liberation. Their reunion on that Pacific beach in Zihuatanejo was more than just two friends finding each other again. It was the culmination of a journey that began in the darkness of Shawshank. The warm sun and endless horizon stood in stark contrast to the cold walls they had left behind. As they embraced, both men understood that their freedom had been earned not just through Andy's tunnel, but through their shared refusal to let their spirits be imprisoned. The fishing boat Andy had dreamed of during those long prison nights now rocked gently in the harbor, a symbol of the dreams that had sustained them both. The story of Shawshank transcends mere prison escape narrative. It stands as a testament to the power of hope and the human spirit's capacity for endurance. Andy Dufresne's greatest achievement wasn't his elaborate breakout, or even his exposure of the warden's corruption. It was the way he maintained his humanity in a place designed to strip it away, and how he helped others, especially Red, find their own path to redemption. His quiet dignity and unwavering hope served as a beacon for those around him, proving that even in the darkest places, the human spirit could remain unbroken. In the end, what Andy and Red discovered was more than freedom from Shawshank's walls. They found that hope truly is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest places, the human spirit can remain unbroken, and that friendship can flourish in the most unlikely soil. Through patience, perseverance, and an unwavering belief in possibility, they proved that sometimes the most profound liberation comes not from escaping our circumstances, but from refusing to let them defeat our essential humanity. The legacy of their friendship and the triumph of their spirits continues to resonate, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, hope can light the way forward, and that redemption, no matter how long delayed, remains within reach for those who dare to dream of it.